Sego, I'm John Kane, and this is Resistance Radio. I want to thank you for joining me. I've got a pretty good show planned for today. I'm going to talk about some subjects that you may or may not be familiar with. Part of what I'm talking about is the fact that there seems to be some subjects that too many people are not familiar with, and that's what I want to cover a little bit today. Talk about the importance of having shows like this, especially on radio stations like WBAI and WPFW. I can't express enough how important it is to have voices like this, like mine, on radio stations like these. So let me first start out by saying, look, if you are listening to us on WBI in New York City, I hope that you will make a contribution to the radio station and do it in the name of Resistance Radio. You can do so by going online to buddy.wbai.org. Make a contribution of any size. You can do it in a timed donation. You can become a sustaining member, something we call the BAI Buddy Program, and you can become my buddy. You can list me as the show that you are donating on behalf of. Again, I almost hesitate to have to say this, but I don't receive those funds. Those are funds that go to the station. It covers the operation of the station, which is costly and necessary for us to stay on the air. So I hope that you will make a contribution. Again, that's buddy.wbai.org, or you can go to your phones and call 1-833-WBAI-NYC. The numbers for that are 1-833-922-4692. And again, you can use your credit card, your checking account, your debit card to make a donation, a one-time donation or a time donation. If by chance you get an answering machine, just leave your name and your number, and one of our operators will get right back to you. Oftentimes, there's several calls coming in at once. At least we hope there are. So we hope that you will leave your information so we can get right back to you. If you're listening in Washington, D.C., which sounds like it's going to be kind of exciting this in the next couple of days. But if you're listening in Washington, D.C. on WPFW, I hope that you will go to their website, which is WPFWFM.org, or call 1-800-222-9739. The regular number is 202-588-9739. Again, toll-free number is 1-800-222-9739. And there again, you make a donation of any size. You can time it out. You can become a sustaining member. You can do whatever you are able to do. And again, I always have to remind people, when I'm asking you to make a contribution to these stations, I'm also asking you to spread the word, and which is kind of what my show is about today. You know, I don't know if anybody saw this. Reggie, I don't know if you saw this, but did you see Linda McMahon on Capitol Hill being embarrassed before Congress when she was asked just some basic questions, especially about their DEI prohibitions and that kind of stuff? I don't know if you caught any of that.
Yes, I did, and you know, I feel real confident in saying I am definitely more qualified to become the Secretary of Education
That's
than
a pretty low
Linda
bar.
McMahon.
That's a pretty low bar there, Reggie. Let's just say
Yeah,
it. She is the most unqualified person that has ever sat in any position of this.
it's unqualified. I
So
mean, you
if
got
you
to
didn't
put
catch any of
all.
this, she was basically asked just really two simple questions, and it was related to the fact that the Trump administration is trying to criminalize teaching about history. And so what she was asked of was whether teaching about the Tulsa Massacre would be considered illegal under these DEI prohibitions that the Trump administration is promoting. And she said she'd have to get back to her on this. You know, this wasn't Jasmine Crockett. This was one of like the Bulldogs. This was just somebody asking just basic questions. And then she said, "Do you know what the Tulsa Massacre is?" And she said, "I'm going to have to look into that." So that's a euphemism for I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, lady. And so this is the level of ignorance that exists in the Trump administration. And of course, when we're talking about education, we are talking about we're talking about children here. Not yes, I don't understand they're attacking, college level and secondary education and that kind of stuff, but we're talking about children here. And so where I come with this is I realize how many people don't know this stuff. And look, for those who aren't familiar with what the Tulsa Massacre is, it's insane that nobody knows it. And I'm gonna actually talk about why people should know more about it, but not just from a moral obligation, but about how these things have been publicized. Look, I realize they're not teaching this in your classroom, but Reg, I don't know. Did you see the Tulsa riots was heavily featured in that series, The Watchmen, with Regina King in it. I mean, it was heavily featured in that series.
For a lot of people,
the Watchmen.
A lot of people, that was the first time anyone knew about that.
I'll bet. And then, of course, there was that other series that was called, what was it called? Oh, I got to put my glasses on. I wrote it down because I knew I was going to forget it. Lovecraft Country. Did you see that one as well?
Okay, right. Yeah.
So it featured heavily, and of course, there's been documentaries on the stuff. So it's not like,
of course,
this is a secret, right? This is it's out there, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look it up. But the reality is, it's like anything else on the internet. If you don't know to ask, you're not going to find it. So, and of course, I always have a difficult time talking about the Tulsa Massacre without talking about what took place 50 or 40 miles down the road. I mean, the thing about the Tulsa Massacre, this was a 1 or a 2-day event. This was like this absolute, complete, crazy civil unrest where white people, mostly because of jealousy and overt racism, decided to kill black people and destroy their affluence. They had created in a suburb of Tulsa a place called Greenwood, which was described as the Black Wall Street. They decided to destroy it all. No, not one person was charged, by the way. So that's what was decided by these white folks. And I know there's some token gestures that are being made even recently. I just heard some city council resolution to create a fund or something like that. But no reparations or anything. In fact, the two survivors of that massacre who launched a suit a few years ago had their case thrown out of court. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But see, that was a like a 2-day thing. This massive riot and massacre of black people and black business and the destruction of black businesses. I mean, the destruction of the whole town, and not just businesses. But again, 40 or 50 miles down the road in what was considered Osage territory. Of course, Tulsa was also Osage territory, I might add. There had been a series of murders that had been going on for, actually it would span almost a decade. And so just like the Tulsa Massacre has been fairly well documented, even in pop culture references with these series, we had a New York Times best-selling book come out on the Osage Murders called Killers of the Flower Moon. David Grant. I had him on my show. You may recall. I had him on my show, Reg. And this was a New York Times best-selling book, which would ultimately become a major motion picture, Hollywood motion picture, featuring Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, as far as star power goes. Of course, there was Lily Gladstone and many other people that I'm more familiar with. But as far as what those who are entertained by movies should know, we're talking about Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro in this film. And yet, in spite of a major motion picture that was nominated for Academy Awards and the like, and a New York Times best-selling book that had a couple of waves, because after the movie came out, it started rising in the charts again. The vast majority of people have no idea. They just don't know what this is. And of course, there's also this tendency, and I talk about this all the time, is this idea of siloing. Okay, we'll talk about the Tulsa Massacre. We're not going to talk about the fact that same type of thing happened in city after city after city after city around within that same time period, the same decade approximately. I mean, there were these kinds of riots, these race riots led by white people attacking black people in cities all over not even just in the South, we're talking about New York. Philadelphia. I mean, we're talking about every place, So yeah, so this wasn't just an isolated situation, and of course the Osage murders. Again, for those who aren't familiar, just like with the Tulsa riots being led by greed, um, and racism, jealousy, you had a situation where the Osage at that moment in the 1920s were essentially the wealthiest people on the planet. Yeah, I know. It doesn't seem right. How could a bunch of ignorant savages have money? But they did. And they did because there was oil. Oil was discovered on their lands. And of course, oil was just beginning to become this hot commodity. But the federal government said, oh, wait a second. We can't have these ignorant savages carrying around money like this. We can't let them have access to it, direct access. So what the federal government said was every Osage had to have a white guardian that would manage their money for them, that would make sure that they were spending it appropriately. And of course, appropriately meant steering the money towards making white people wealthy. Now, so not only did you have this system of just overt corruption associated with these guardianships that the federal government imposed upon the Osage, but you also had a whole, system or climate, I guess, surrounding the white people to just screw over the Osage. Men would literally seduce an Osage woman, and oftentimes doing whatever was necessary to do so, alcohol, drugs, whatever, seduce an Osage woman, bang out a few kids, and I know that sounds crude, but have a few children with that woman, and then kill her. And, when you watch the movie, it makes it sound like there was just this one bad guy with the people he influenced and around the town and, his nephews and stuff like that. There was one bad guy, the De Niro character, and just a couple of murders. According to David Grant's book, it may have been over 1,000 Osage were murdered. Over 1,000, over a period that was, it was actually called a reign of terror for a period of time. And it may have been for as long as 20 years or longer. And they were murdered so white men could gain control of the oil head rights. Now, they couldn't own them, but they could have control of them because they were now the legal guardians of their half Osage children. And so we're talking about premeditated murder at a level that most people can't even conceive of. Now, granted, there was a major motion picture about this. There was a major best-selling book that was put out. But the vast majority of people have no freaking idea about Tulsa, about Osage. Residential schools. The vast majority of Americans have no idea that for 150 years, the United States was ripping children out of native homes and putting them in these prison-like schools. They have no idea. And now you have an administration that says, don't teach this stuff. If you're not going to teach Hup, Great America stuff, then don't teach anything at all. That's literally what the Trump administration is saying. They are forbidding there to be a conversation. And I think when you ask anybody, they say, well, we got to make sure that both sides are being told. Well, what are both sides of the Tulsa Massacre? Reggie, what's the other side? I don't get it. How do you balance that conversation? Well, there were good people on both sides. Really?
I don't know. The white people buying guns or making. I don't know. That seemed like the other side. What they're talking about.
They were throwing sticks of dynamite outside of their private airplanes.
Sticks of
flying.
dynamite.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, look.
Sticks of dynamite.
When you watch this, even on those two series, which are fiction essentially. I mean, both Lovecraft and Watchmen, they're but they're based on the true events that took place. So when you watch it, unfortunately, you might see that and think, well, that's not real. I mean, it's not real, right? I mean, it can't be real. No, it's real. That's the part that's true. It's the other stuff with superheroes and mysticism and magic, and that's the stuff that's not real, right? I mean, but so this is what we have. I mean, and so the same ignorant woman, this Linda McMahon, who went out to Massapequa to defend the use of native mascots. So this mental giant is going to weigh in on what are valid civil rights? I mean, so she's going to go out to Massapequa and support these white people so they can play Indian and suggest that depriving these white people of their right to play Indian is somehow a violation of civil rights. And she's not even saying it's violating their civil rights. She's saying it's violating our civil rights by not having what? Our images mocked by white people? Like that's a privilege that we're being denied? I mean, this is the level of ignorance that comes out of these people. So, I mean, I don't know how to fully address some of this, but and one of the things that I did a couple of posts this week, and I'm saying, look, I know that I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not Fox News. I don't have millions of people listening to me or waiting patiently to hear me each week. Maybe 1,000 or a couple of thousand, maybe thousands catch this show. But man, I need you guys to spread the word because it doesn't. I mean, if a major motion picture and a best-selling novel can't tell the story, if these streaming services telling the story of the Tulsa Massacre if that isn't getting to people, I know that I'm not doing it. I mean, I'm going to be here. I'm not quitting. Don't get me wrong here. I don't want anybody to think, well, he's so frustrated. I don't know how he doesn't burn out. I don't burn out. What was the one I heard today where Trump tried to say that Joe Biden wasn't the sharpest bulb? Well, I'm not the sharpest bulb. No, I'm not. This bulb ain't burning out. Put it that way, okay? I am going to continue to do this because here's my view on this. If I reach a couple of people, if I reach a handful of people that I can inspire them to continue these conversations, and look, I hope by being on the radio that I'm getting to a few people, and that's why I take the show and I put it up as a podcast. It's you can find me on Resistance Radio with John Kane podcast. I do my old show as a podcast, which is Let's Talk Native. Yes, I'm wearing my Let's Talk Native shirt on my on my video today. So, I mean, so that goes up as a podcast. I have a YouTube channel called Let's Talk Native TV, and I produce. Not only do I put these shows on YouTube, but I also do some short form videos. In fact, I started doing a couple of them called In Under 10 Minutes. So I did one on the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. I did one on the Trust Doctrine. I'm going to do one coming up here within this week on the Plenary Powers Doctrine. I just think it's important because, look, one thing I do realize is that people's attention span is pretty low. So the idea of trying to do a 1-hour show, perhaps in the radio where I've got maybe a bit of a captive audience because somebody's got it on in their home or something like that, or in their car or something. I think I can utilize the full time, especially if I offer up some like call-ins at the end, which I think I'm going to try to do that today. Then maybe I can string people along for the whole hour. But I know that you got 5 or 10 minutes to grab somebody's attention in the world that we live in with social media, with headline news. You've got 5 or 10 minutes to grab somebody's attention. So that's why I come out of the gate usually trying to blast it pretty heavy, and I don't feel like I'm wasting my time talking about supporting these radio stations. I think that's important because this is my vehicle, right? This is the vehicle that I have. So I mean, I know that I've got a limited amount of time, even within the hour that I'm on the radio. I've got a limited amount of time to capture somebody's attention, and I know that I'm not Robert De Niro or Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm not Regina King. I'm not going to have the kind of audience that some of these people have. And look, they're doing the work too. I mean, I applaud. Look, I wasn't crazy about the film Killers of the Flower Moon, but I'm glad they did it because at least it's out there. And it tells. I'm not saying it tells the story completely accurately, but it tells the story nonetheless. And my hope is always, look, if you listen to me on the radio or as a podcast and I say something that doesn't go down well, and I know it, I recently got some feedback. Says, well, I don't always agree with your delivery or your tone. Well, okay, I get it. Perhaps my tone, I don't know. I try to laugh sometimes too, Reg. I don't understand what's wrong with my tone, but apparently,
I don't understand. I hear you laughing all the time.
But apparently, some people think that my delivery is crass, perhaps, or my tone is a little dark. I don't know. I'm talking about some dark stuff here. So But regardless, if there's something about the way I come across with these issues, then don't let me be the sole source for your information. Go on the internet, find the stuff. I mean, find out what you can about the Tulsa massacres and the other massacres that took place within that early 1900s. I mean, because it was amazing. It's amazing when you look at that history. Find out what Native people are going through. Find out about residential schools and the atrocities that those things really are. And there's still people today trying to spin it around. Well, Native people, they needed education and they didn't have it on the reservation. So many people did send their kids to these schools. Look, I'll acknowledge there was a level of complicity in these residential schools. But when there wasn't a complicit behavior, then the feds came in. They took kids. They grabbed kids and they forced them into these schools. So, yeah, there was a level of complicity, and part of it was driven by the overt poverty. I mean, we're talking about poverty that most people can't even fathom. I mean, and it still exists today. There are some native territories. I don't live on a completely impoverished community where I live here. I mean, I'm not saying I still think 30% of the Seneca people are living at or below the poverty line, but that's miles ahead of where some places are. So, but I know there's abject poverty in many native territories. I know it. I've seen it. I've been there, and look, and I certainly never have lived an affluent lifestyle in all the places that I've lived. I've always been very hand to mouth. So I get that. But when you realize that this poverty was created by policy, I mean, people know what Jim Crow is. They know what it is. They may not teach it very much in school because not just because of DEI, but or the anti-DEI movement, but I think that schools have always been geared towards promoting patriotism. That's not new with Donald Trump. I mean, it isn't. It's not new with Donald Trump. It's heightened with Donald Trump. He's actually trying to criminalize anything that could even come across as anti-American. Look, these protests out in Los Angeles, this isn't about immigration. This is about authoritarian rule over anybody who would dare defy, including Gavin Newsom and Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. I mean, Mike Johnson, he said that he wasn't sure if Gavin Newsom should be charged criminally, but that he should be tarred and feathered. I mean, that's vigilante. That's like lynching somebody. I mean, and look, you can kill somebody by dipping them in tar and coating them with feathers. I mean, it is not necessary, but it's certainly torture, and it's not corporal punishment doled out through the court system. And this is what the Speaker of the House is recommending. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is where things are at. And Reg, I hope millions of people protest Trump's birthday parade. I really do. I hope. Yeah, look, I'm not promoting violence, but I will say nonviolent direct action is necessary. And I'll be disappointed if it turns it into nothing but a day of fluff. I really will be. But I will say this.
So too. I hope so. I agree with you, John.
I'm not in love with the slogan. I got to tell you. No kings.
I'm not feeling it either.
I mean, especially if you're a country that loves kings. I mean, look, they love this stuff. They love King Charles. They love royal weddings. They love princes and princesses, and they love all of that crap. And that was the best you could do. No kings. I get it. I support the movement. I support it because it's basically an anti-Trump movement. But that was the best you could do. How about no tyranny? I mean. Look, the United States revolted against the king so they could create their own. That's what they did. I mean, there was some question on what to call George Washington. I mean, whether they should have made him a king. I mean, there was a real question about this. How much they should elevate these positions so that they mocked at least royalty to some extent. And look, they like the king of rock and roll. They like the queen of soul. I mean, look, Americans love that royalty crap. I mean, they really do. I mean, and so you say no kings, and I mean, that's almost kind of validating to some extent that that you're acknowledging he's a king that you don't want almost. So I don't know. I had to take my shot at no kings. Sorry, but I do hope people show up. You don't have to wear a no kings hat or T-shirt to show up for these things.
Oh God, please not. No, please
Especially since they're laced with battered American flags and everything else. I mean, but I hope millions of people show up in various places, not the least of which should be Washington. I hope people show up, and honestly, I hope they raise some hell. I do. I mean, I hope nobody is killed. I hope nobody is injured, but there has to be clarity. When I hear people say nothing is ever solved through violence, well, I'm not advocating violence, but you know what? There was this thing called slavery. Do you remember? Did you ever read about that, Reg? Slavery?
Yeah.
I think 600,000 Americans died over that issue.
Yeah, I kind of heard that somewhere. I don't know. It might have been a TV series. Or
yeah, maybe
like
that's what it was. It was probably just one of these, these fantasy TV series. No, I mean, some things do mean that you have to fight and fight back. And and here's the thing I got to say about California. Those cops are Californians. Those National Guardsmen are Californians. At some point, you have an obligation. You, individually, as a human being, have an obligation to assess where you are in these situations. And I think you look, what they say during the Nuremberg trials, I was just following orders wasn't a defense. Well, I mean, beyond the legal implications of what you are doing out there, there's just the moral implications. At some point, these are our neighbors. These are people who you live next to. And granted, if you're really white and you can look at these protesters as being brown, and it's not a simple skin color issue, but if that's the way you're perceiving these things, and look, when you got the federal government saying that these are just criminals and that they're, and you dehumanize them. I mean, look, that's literally what guys like Johnson and Trump are doing. They're dehumanizing those people who Trump sent the National Guard in, to defend against. They're calling it an invasion. They're calling it any number of things. And it's just categorically not true. I mean, it's just not true. So if you are one of those people in uniform that's being called upon, and look, I've seen it. I've seen at least 2 occasions where a cop just pulled up his gun and shot a rubber bullet at somebody because he could. That Australian reporter, and then I saw somebody else that was simply asking, what's your name? What's your name? Do you have a badge number? And at some point, the cop just pulls up his gun and shoots the guy. Now, granted, these are supposedly non-lethal weapons, armaments.
Rubber bullets.
But they can still kill, folks. They still can kill. And the idea that you've armed police officers, not just with the weaponry, but with the mindset that they have full authorization to do this kind of crap. Oh, yeah, we're going to do an investigation on that. Like hell you are. There has to be, and so, I mean, there has to be accountability. And how can there be when the governor of the state of California has no say, appears to have no say in this? Because the president of the United States is literally trumping his authority. Yeah, I said that. Trumping his authority. I mean, I don't know. This is I'm not saying that any of this stuff is a complete shock because he said he was going to do this stuff, folks. And and so again, this thing with the whole no kings, you voted for him. And I'm not saying that everybody voted for Donald Trump, but those of you who participated in this election, you validated the outcome. Now, I know that sounds like I'm just saying nobody should vote. I don't know what the answer is, but I will say you're not going to vote your way out of this. There has to be people on the street The people have to stand up. They have to reject what this behavior is. I was glad to hear him get booed at the Kennedy Center, and hopefully embarrassed. I mean, every time one of his moron secretaries gets put in front of Congress, it's embarrassing. I mean, I'm not embarrassed to watch these people make fools of themselves, but there's a certain part of me that says you can't even come up with a reasonable answer. None of you, whether it's Hegseth, whether it's McMahon, whoever. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. It is pretty remarkable how far degraded the United States, and look, I say because has become, but it's the system. The system has produced all this stuff. Yeah, I know there's people who are challenging it in court, and Trump is either, complying with court orders or he's not. But you have an entire wing of the political system, the entire Republican base, that will just completely go along with whatever Trump says. I mean, that's incredible. I don't think I've ever. I mean, even when you hear an occasional thing out of McConnell or Graham or one of these guys that seems to at least raise a question, they still fully capitulate each time. I don't know. It's kind of an amazing circumstance. Look, we even had a kind of, not only obviously the whole mascot thing, is still raging on. You've got the Trump administration convincing one school to defy New York State's, the education department's authority. And look, every time I hear a story, and I got to say this again for about the 10th time on this show, the New York State Education Department has never threatened to pull funding from Massapequa. Is that a possibility? Absolutely, it's a possibility. It's one of the mechanisms of authority that they have. But every time I hear a news broadcast that says, well, either Massapequa has to change their mascot or the state is going to pull its funding, the state's never said that. They've never once said that. And to be clear, the authority of the New York State Education Department is to either withhold funds, it can remove school officers or administrators, it can place an entire school in receivership. I mean, so that's the authority they have. But that's not to say that they've threatened to do any of those things. That's just the authority that they have to do. I mean, they can do all that stuff. But they haven't threatened, they haven't outlined a plan to do so in any way, shape, or form. They've tried to work with schools. They've given some schools additional time to make the transition. I think they've even provided some funding in a couple of situations to help with the transition. So you got this one school defying because Linda McWrestlenut shows up, and and of course you've got Trump standing with his posing for pictures with a Massapequa Chiefs sweatshirt and the like. So, but we even had an issue a little closer to home. I live on the Cattaraugus territory of Seneca Nation, which is on the western part of the state. So Buffalo is the city that's only a half hour away. But then if you go east, you get to Rochester. I've got some friends out there, and in fact, one of my friends, Ron Garrow, is head of the Native American Community Center out there. He learned that Monroe County, which had hoisted up a Haudenosaunee flag at one of their flag demonstrations, took it down. So he went before the county legislature, I guess, and wanted to know why. He could, and he never got any answers. And I gotta tell you, there's a part of me that says this got DEI, anti-DEI written all over it. No, we can't have that kind of diversity, on public display. Now, they haven't come right out and said this, but if you took down a flag I liken this to taking down a pride flag or any other flag that might show a level of discontent with the United States. So they took down the Haudenosaunee flag, and for those who aren't familiar, this is the purple flag that's got the Hiawatha belt illustrated across it. They took it down, and they haven't said why. And, there's a part of me that says, I know why. I know that there's probably somebody on the right that's part of this county, executives or whatever, that said, "Nah, we're going to take that down now. We don't want to get, we don't want to wake up Trump to the idea that we're accommodating that level of diversity by putting up a native flag where we should only have American flags or state flags or county flags or whatever." This is the world we live in, folks. So, in the same way that when I listen to public radio saying, "Look, we're under threat of losing funding, and we need your voices on the issue." No, you don't. You need their money. It's the same thing that we tell our listeners every week. We don't need you to go to bat for us before Congress. We don't need you to go to bat for us before the state legislature. We need you to support us. And so at some point, trying to do this thing through the political system as it exists, it's part of the reason that I took the mascot fight to the New York State Education Department rather than to the New York State Legislature or to the governor or to any other politician. Because they are dysfunctional. They are so polarized. And not only are they polarized right and left, because oftentimes you find the right and left aren't quite as far apart as you think they are. What they're polarized from is from the people. Because the main function of a politician, once they are elected, is to get reelected, is to broaden their base. That's why Kathy Hochul wouldn't even touch the mascot issue. She basically said, hey, it wasn't me. It was them. It was them, the education department. They're independent of me. I had nothing to do with it. This woman doesn't have enough courage. This apologist for the Thomas Indian schools didn't have enough courage to say, I didn't have a role in the ban, but I support my New York State Education Department. She couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. She just kind of, no, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. This is the gutlessness that exists with any of these politicians, right or left. Kathy Hochul's a Democrat. Probably one of the worst governors that the state has seen. From a native standpoint, definitely the worst. And, she may be handing the keys to the mansion over to a Republican at the rate she's going. Who knows? And, and look, and I'm not even saying, the last Republican governor was George Pataki. He wasn't even that bad. Yeah, we had some knockdown dragouts in the street with state police at the time, but he kind of came around. I don't know that any Republican can come around anymore. I just think this is where it's at. All right, hey, I do have a few minutes left, so let me go to a couple of calls. I do like to do this. I know I don't do it enough. I was reminded in a scolding, I think, a couple of weeks ago that this used to be a talkback show. Well, it still is sometimes, but things have changed since COVID and being remote and that kind of stuff. So let me give out the studio line. It's 212-209-2877. That's 212-209-2877. If you want to call in, look, I'm open to suggestions on how we get this information out there. I know we're not going to produce a major motion picture. I'm probably not going to write a New York Times best-selling book, although I am working on one, but I don't expect it to have that kind of traction. and I don't expect any kind of Netflix series either. So, or HBO series or whoever it was that carried these two series that mentioned the Tulsa riots. But we got to do more. We got to teach stuff at home. We've got to push back. And let me say this clearly. The New York State Department of Education is rejecting Trump's call and Linda McMahon's call to rescind the mascot ban. They won't do it. They answered, and they answered firmly. And they said, look, if you want us to get rid of Huguenots and Dutchmen, yeah, we can do that too, I guess, if that's what you're really against, because you think we've somehow singled out native mascots while we're not going after the white ones. But I don't know what the hell a Huguenot is anyway, so I don't care if they get rid of them or not. And as far as Dutchmen, you Dutch, when you came to our lands, you guys were pretty much jerks. And I'm trying to keep this FCC compliant, so I only use words like jerks. So, the Dutch were responsible for the massacres that would wipe out the native people so towns like Massapequa could just steal their identity 100 years or 200 years or 300 years later. So again, the studio line is 212-209-2877 if you've got a comment or a question. Maybe you got a criticism. Maybe my tone is too harsh. I don't smile enough. Or no, I guess if you're listening to me on the radio, you don't see my smile. But Reg, you know I smile. Damn it.
They can hear it, John. They can hear it, John. They can hear the smile.
All right, there we go. That's what I was going for.
See? That's why you asked me to come on the air with you, man.
Yeah, because somehow laughing into a microphone all by yourself is odd. At least when you're there, I feel like two of us are laughing. Oh man, I miss being in studio with you, man. I really do. I wish I could do it all the time, and you know, I look forward to making it back to New York.
Likewise.
I still want to try to make it to Washington too. I want to do some events down there. They've got an event they were planning in a couple of weeks that I just don't know if I can swing down and make it. But I'd like to do more in the cities that I'm broadcasting, and I know there's a couple of other. There's a couple of affiliates that also carry the show, and I don't do enough to promote them. I guess I should get a list of who's putting the show up and mention them on air as well. I appreciate anybody who helps me get this word out because these issues are relatively unknown. I mean, there was a poll a few years ago, and there were people who didn't know Native people still existed. 25% of the American population, by many estimates, don't even know we're still here. I mean, they don't even know we're still here. I mean, of course, they have their own family lore. And it's, oh, yeah, my great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. Yeah, there's that. Mm-hmm. But as far as a distinct people with distinct cultures and governance as political entities, there are many Americans who have no idea we're still here. And look, there are towns that are close by to many of our territories. I was just hearing from one of the guys from NICED said that he spoke to somebody in Liverpool, which is a suburb of not London, but of Syracuse, and the student says, "I didn't know that there were still Onondagas, and they only live south of the city. That's where the Onondaga territory is. It's amazing that we could have this level of." And I say ignorance, and I don't mean it to be an insult, because I'm in this instance, when I say ignorance, I mean ignorance due to the lack of education and the lack of anybody wiping away that ignorance. Look, willful ignorance is something that I will always condemn. But the idea of ignorance just based on the lack of knowledge, that's a solvable problem. You can't solve willful ignorance. I mean, if you choose to be ignorant, that you know, as I say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him think. So I mean, this is, but we can inform you, and once you're informed, you can use your own mind to decide. All right, I'm either gonna use that information to inform what I do going forward, or I'm gonna ignore it. I'm gonna pretend I never heard it. But you'd have to do so willfully. You'd have to do so willfully. Again, the number is 212-209-2877. I don't know if we got anybody trying to call in yet.
We got callers.
All right, let's go ahead and let's go to the first one. Caller, you're up first. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Mike from Massapequa.
Mike from Massapequa?
Yes, I am not with Massapequa. I do not believe that they should have the chief name. So when they say that it's everyone, it's not everyone. I think they're being disrespectful, and it's pretty absurd. And I've listened to you week after week after week say that is a picture of a Plains Indian, not a native of Long Island. So,
and that's
my question to you, John.
You go ahead.
My question to you, John, is: would you like to come to Massapequa and sit down with the superintendent with me, and let's grill him? Let's put it in his face. Let's bring the water to the horse.
I'd love to. In fact, and I've done this in the past. Look, in some of my earliest battles with schools, they came on the behest of the school board or the superintendent. I was asked to enlighten them at Lancaster High School out here in Western New York. I was asked to go to a few of these school board meetings. I had to take on my own school without permission or without an invitation, which led to this ban, which is the Cambridge Central School in upstate New York. But I've always offered, because frankly, I think the kids deserve also, I think the kids deserve an explanation. And certainly, if you sit down with these people,
deserve an explanation, because that school district is not providing the kids with the appropriate information.
Absolutely.
And they are just continuing on with the racist behavior, and it needs to end. And you know what? They live inside of their own silo, inside of their own bubble, and they don't know that you exist, John. They don't know that the fight is there. You should come and bring the fight to them with me.
Well, and to me, I mean,
it's fed up.
It's not even just a fight. It's about going there and having. I'm prepared to have a civil discourse. I mean, I'm not going there to just to beat anybody up and to stand in front of them and call them overt racist. Usually, they put that on display by themselves. But I would love to come to Massapequa. I would love to come there and have a conversation. Well, Mike, do me a favor. You can look me up. I don't know if you do social media, but by all means, reach out to me. If there was a way that I could plan a trip out there and sit with the superintendent and even some board members, just to have a civil conversation, because they didn't even have that conversation with the folks from NICED, from the education department. They went right to Trump and got Linda McMahon out there, and of course the absurdity of these guys suggesting that this is a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act because it's discriminatory towards Native people. We didn't just ask for this; we have been demanding this for decades. So it's absurd. Mike, I appreciate the call, but do reach out to me. I'd love to come out to Massapequa and look. Maybe I can grab up Harry Wallace or Lance Gumbs from Puspatuck and from Shinnecock. We can have a civil conversation. But I think they deserve to hear from Native people, because they're not. They're absolutely not.
With the superintendent and sit down, and maybe the superintendent and the board, because they haven't had anyone from the Shinnecock Nation in. They haven't had anyone in like you. They only have their lens.
Right.
We need your lens to help them understand, because these white European, mostly Italian, Irish, and also mostly FDNY, NYPD, blue-collar workers, they don't know what they need to think anymore. They're lost. We need to help them. We need to help them. Let them know that this behavior that they're continuing on by trying to fight for the chief as their mascot is just plainly disgusting, and it needs to stop.
Well, and it's not even just a mascot.
Who's not like me.
They're trying to claim it as their identity. I mean, when I saw their promotion for their fundraising thing they did last weekend, they said, this isn't just about fundraising, it's who we are. I mean, this is literally them.
It's absurd. It's absurd. These are 50 and 60 and 70-year-old adults projecting on children what they thought what they think is right. They're projecting their racism.
They're biased. Yeah, there's no question.
Unbelievably sad.
There's no question about it. Mike, I appreciate the call. I look forward to trying to work something out. I'd love to come down. So let's see if we can make that happen. All right, let me go to another caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, John. This is Cruz from Central Harlem.
Hey, Cruz. Thanks for calling. It's always good to hear from you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to push back a little bit.
All right, go ahead. Okay. Please
do. Not too much. You stated that there's a left and a right. There's no left. There's only right and neoliberalism, okay? Because we live in a capitalist country, and both parties have been bought off by capitalist interests. I don't care what shade or body they, want to be walking in. That's why we have the policies that we do. And a lot of the stuff that Trump is doing was ushered in by the Democrats.
Absolutely.
Now, the second thing I'm going to ask is if you could kind of do a show Jacqueline Lukman, she said that, she would like to do something with you. And I think that would be a very good show because she could then talk about Tulsa and a lot of these half-truths that are going on, right? So you started talking about the fact that, yes, there was a lot of racial brutality, but as I understand it, a lot of it was, again, we're going to go back to money and power. That was the thing that really decimated the African-American community afterwards. It wasn't only the fact that because the government literally went in there and, because of financial stuff, went and decimated what was then left. And, of course, what the people did on the ground because of what was going on economically.
No, and Native people have experienced that same strategy. So
absolutely,
what I will, my only,
would love that.
My only pushback to your pushback is I did say there's not much difference between the left and the right that we're talking about here. So I agree with you 100%.
And you continue talking, boy. I was like, come on, John, don't go there, please.
No, I mean, honestly, like I said, when I look at somebody like Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, you're right. There's nothing left about that. I see the same problems that exist. As I say, the Republicans don't have a monopoly on racism, and they don't have a monopoly on on capitalism or any of that stuff. They're all in on this stuff. So I agree with you 100%. As far as Jackie Luckman goes, I would love to do a show with her. We've done some things in the past, and we are working on something. We're going to try to put something together. I'd love to go I'd love to go to DC, but we don't have to be in the same room to do it together. So we're gonna do some shows together.
No, she's fun. I like her so much.
She's awesome. She's awesome. She's great, and I know we do some shows together when we're doing some fundraising and that kind of stuff. But no, we're gonna do a couple of shows together. So you can count on that. You can bank on that one. We will do that, and she is great.
Thumbs up for you both.
Yeah. No, she's awesome. You. Cruz, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Reg, let's try to get one more in before we go, if we can. All right, caller, you're up next. You're up next. You're up last. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, it's Mayat calling from the Paranormal Cove. Yes, that was me that reminded you the show used to be Talkback. I appreciate the acknowledgement. First of all, you don't need to give the number out because there are people who you won't get to in the queue.
All right. Reg. I'm not gonna go through this again with my. Look, I appreciate that there's listeners out there that maybe don't agree with some of the stuff that I say, but I don't need somebody coming in to bash putting the number out for the station. I mean, that's kind of why we're here. So I don't know why this woman is so insistent on trying to promote herself over the very station that we're trying to broadcast from. But I'm going to apologize for her. This is I've kind of endured her commentaries and her self-promotion, probably longer than I should have, and I'm simply not going to tolerate it going forward. So anybody who's offended by that, I apologize to you, but I'm not going to apologize to Mayat. So, all right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up. Reg, I appreciate you joining me and participating with me. It's always a pleasure to chew the fat with you, and I appreciate you participating.
Likewise.
Like I said, this is John Kane. This is Resistance Radio. I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Yahweh.